Welcome back to another one of our Hole Design 101 tutorials, and today we're going to look at probably the sexiest design, which is the drivable par 4. Now these, you do not need to have one on your course. I think they're probably a lot more prevalent in TGC community than they are in real life, but they're a great way to add risk reward and a proper scoring hole to your repertoire. A drivable par 4, I would say, needs to be reachable pretty much 90% of the time. But also it shouldn't always be the best play, and it's that balance of risk reward that is absolutely key. So over the course of this video we're going to dive into everything that makes a drivable par 4 great, and more than any other hole, this one requires perfect balance of risk reward options and making sure that every different alternative you're providing the player is equally viable so that people will choose those. And so the first major aspect that you must have in this hole is danger. You've got to make people worry about picking driver out, or know that, yep, they're going for it and they might make eagle, but also they might make bogey. Often that's going to come into play with water, is typically used on these sorts of holes, a cliff edge in this case, but you've got to have a risk that if I don't pull off this shot, and it's got to be relatively low percentage, then I'm in real trouble. Now there's other ways of mitigating that, but I think the first one has to be you've got to get that danger element in order to make it a bit of a thrill-seeking shot. Now in this case, on the 4th at Kaiuma, you really have to try to carry this or trust that bouncing it into this slope is going to take it down to the green. And there's that real thrill of seeing the ball bounding down that I don't think you get by just carrying it all the way. I was desperately with this one trying to make it an interesting shot with a driver rather than just hitting and landing on the green, or landing short and bouncing it straight. So I felt that idea of running it around this cliff was something that was kind of unique at the time. I hadn't seen it done before, but also it added a bit of thrill that you wouldn't get otherwise. Now in terms of the miss, well, you first of all have the miss left, which is obviously perilous, but also let's look at the miss right. If you miss right, you are below the green, pitching back over to a green that runs hard away from you. So I wanted to make it that if you didn't pull off this shot well enough and bouncing it into that slope and running it down, you had to be left, you had to be taken on the cliff edge. If you were bailing out right, you were left with, the further right and long you went, you were left with a really tricky pitch back up. Now that said, I actually had one more hole on this that I felt as a drivable par 4 was even more perilous than the first, and that's the 14th. Now this one I enjoyed by just playing with the distance that you could hit. In the old game, 285 was driver distance that you really kind of designed around. Obviously we can now mix and match that a little bit more, but look where that puts you. 285 has you landing pretty much middle of the green, so you're either trying to take a little bit off it or work something into it or hit a partial, and the more precise I was asking you to get, the more difficult that shot is to hit and you're more likely to go off line. I also wanted to include, I felt with drivable par 4s the danger is typically in front of them, and so people never had any fear of hitting long. Well, suddenly I thought, well, why don't we flip that and let's put all the big danger long and right, because it was always short and left. So the two par 4s we've got here, you've seen 4, big danger short and left, and 14, big danger long and right. And so if anyone's going for this and hitting in the water, they are pretty much reloading. And then you go, well, do you really want, you can go for this, it's definitely in range, is it the best decision? Is it the right thing to do? So this for me is kind of the epitome of one of those holes where you very much can make eagle. You can land it on the front of the green, and the pin spots are all pretty accessible. You've got one here which it funnels down to and gives you a flat putt, one here and one just back right. Some of them can be slightly tucked in behind these saddles here, but you can make an eagle on any one of them. The thing is, you can also, with an overly aggressive swing, make bogey. So in order for that risk reward aspect to really work, you've got to allow a safe play, and for me you've got to allow a variety of them. We're now looking at a course that I'm working on currently. It's far from finished, and this is going to be called South Yarra Golf Club probably. And whilst it's drivable, what we're going to look at with this one is the variety of options that you get off the tee, where you could put it, to make you question whether just taking driver and going for it is going to yield the best score. So leaping back to the tee, you can see that our driver, if I've got the longest driver which I'm tending to design around, it can cover that bunker, it can bounce on up, and I've tested it enough, you can land and hold the green. However, where could you end up? Well, you could be ending up in one of these bunkers, which is short right. Now, if that's the case, what sort of a pitch are you leaving yourself? Well, you're leaving yourself a shortish kind of flop recovery to a slope that runs hard away from you and potentially into another bunker, which is very doable. So is that the best shot? It's definitely low percentage landing on the green. And really for this one I wanted to make it the safer you go is basically short and left. The further you go this way, the safer the shot. So if we go left, well, we're potentially running into that green side bunker here, but if so for this pin, well, you're flopping up. That's going to be okay. And I think when you're designing this, you want to be thinking about where's the next shot going to be played from, rather than just can I hit the green, call it a day. If people miss there, then what? If people miss here and long left, then what? What about if people miss over here? So with this sort of a pin, I think if you're not going for it, we're acknowledging that going for it is a risky play at the best of times. But if you do go for it and funnel it kind of right down the middle of the green, you're going to end up with a putt that looks something like this. And actually that's a really, really makeable eagle putt. And that's how I wanted the green to slope. I wanted if you go for that and you pull it off, you're going to be rewarded with the best look at eagle that you could possibly get. But what's the easiest way to approach that otherwise? Well, actually we could play 3-wood out here, and that's going to leave us a view into the green looking something like that. Now if that's the case, well, we've got an awful lot of green to play with. We're going to be hitting pitch or lob wedge, and we can err a little bit more cautiously towards the left of the pin, which is going to leave ourselves an uphill putt. So one particular trick I like to pull with this type of hole is, all I've done is change where the pin is, but now let's look at how much that has changed this hole. Because it's so short, you can make the angles really matter. Suddenly your best player is not bombing it over this bunker, because that would leave you a downhill, pretty dicey putt. Suddenly you actually want to be shooting the gap between those two and really just laying a little chip up there. Haven't finished sculpting the green yet, so it'll be a little more treacherous. But if I were laying up down this side, well, now I'm hitting over that bunker to get there. That bunker just there. So I definitely want to be laying up down this side if I possibly can, and going as far left as I possibly can do. Whereas pin 4 I've put just in the very centre of the green, so around about here. Now with that in mind, if we zoom out a little bit, mouse has gone off it. Where do we want to lay up? Well, for that pin we're going to want to be laying up over here, so short right, and that will open up the middle of the green a little bit more. If I'm laying up as far left as possible, well, guess what, to get to that pin I'm now having to go over that same bunker that protects this pin. The more on a short hole like this, where you can see the flag and pin position off the tee, you can really play with those angles, because you're saying to the player, well, you can see where the flag is, you work out where to go. The final pin for this one is back right, and that's going to be the slipperiest pitch you've got. But with all of these, what we're really saying is you want to reward the player going for the bold play and pulling it off, but also we want to reward the player who wants to play this smart and think about, well, what if I hit it over here? Is that good percentage play that's going to yield me birdie way more times than it's going to yield me bogey? And the more you can make those options change, I guess, depending on the hole, and you don't want to do this hole, this side is best for this pin, this side is best for this pin, too often. But on a hole like this, it's perfect for allowing people to really think through how they attack a hole. And it's definitely something that I would encourage you doing on a short drive ball 4, mainly because you can exacerbate the angles so much. If I play right the way to this, look at the angle that we're creating into pin 2. Whereas if I play all the way to this side, I mean, we've got a difference of something around about, well, 50-60 degrees in terms of angle of attacking that pin. So there's loads you can do with this when you start playing with that, along with how far people are playing their shots. You can add a whole other dimension to it. Now, why is this so important? Well, if going for the green every single time is the best option or the percentage play, and you haven't given someone a good option to lay up that's making them think, well, I can just bunt a 3-wood down here and then I've got a decent pitch in, then they're just going to go through it every time, and your strategy is pretty much lost. So this one I can play 3-wood pretty safely. Nearly fell in. And even then, as bad of a shot as I've played, I've still got a pretty decent pitch into a receptive area of the green because I've played it sensibly. I do want to be further off this side, I do want to have a slightly shorter shot, but for a tee shot that's as bad as I'm going to hit it, it's not too bad an outcome. So the next thing that I'd want to consider with this sort of a hole is making the green really tricky. Much like with a reachable par 5, you're giving the player the option to reach this hole in under regulation. Therefore, you can really ramp up the difficulty around the green. Now this one, 15 at White Pepper Jeans. Firstly, you've got the angle of the green. You'll see that it's really offset from where the fairway is, which means that in order to maximise that angle, you're playing way out. Whereas from the angle approaching the green on the driver line, you've got a much smaller margin for error. Secondly, you can get pretty mean with the pin positions themselves. So if we have a look at this one, it's on not a yellow slope, but it's on a fast green slope. You've got a runoff short, and there's going to be some slippery putts there. The other pins on this green, you've got one back here, so right inside this large mound, one pretty much on top of one just here I think, and then one here as well. So it's a small green, and that's again deliberate given the length of the hole. You're demanding precision if a player plays it strategically. And I guess a good rule of thumb is this is a green that really, given that it's a par 4, you're actually saying to most people, well, the play is a hybrid and then a wedge. So you're creating a very short par 3 green, but some people are going to play that with driver. So therefore, you really can ramp up that difficulty in terms of the approach. Now coming back to Whiskey Jeans, and this hole, we want to talk about where to put it in a routing as well. I think a Driveable 4 is a great hole to put kind of midway along one of the 9s, and this is at 13, so it's at a really perfect point. You don't want it too early in the round, you wouldn't really want it as an opening hole or probably a closing hole, but it's a great way to add spice midway through a 9 holes. You can also use it to allow a real scoring stretch. So this is followed up by a par 5, which means you've got that possibility of going eagle-eagle through 2 holes. So we've talked about where to put this in a routing. I'd say middle of the 9 is a good way of doing it to break it up. Let's look at where not to put it. And we're currently coming down 18th at Marlette Fells, which is my rookie design course that won that contest. And whilst this is a really good hole and I enjoy it, putting it at 18 is one of the decisions that I didn't like the most. And I really boxed myself into that early on. I decided that this was what I want to do. This is how I wanted to finish because I hadn't seen a lot of people do it. And I then played it and built it, and I think it's a really solid Driveable 4, but it just doesn't work as an 18th. Now, if we analyse what should make a good 18th, it should require a risk and reward sort of element, and this very much has that. The problem is I find a Driveable par 4 can be pretty all or nothing. You are hitting that one shot and then either pitching up or chipping on or what have you. And it didn't really have that spectacular second shot element to it. Now, do I think it's a good hole? I really do. I think it breaks up this course really nicely. Do I think it could have been better at say 6, 7, 13, 14? I think the course could have really used that, and that's something I would have changed. So I wanted to finish up by looking at all of those items in concert and seeing whether they work, and talking about how you might want to break some of those rules a little bit as well. Now we're at the second at Montellago, which is a Driveable par 4, and the first thing you'll notice is that I've literally just said don't put it too early on in a routing. I wanted to do something different with this one, and I think if you know what you're doing and how it's going to work, then it can be a really good, powerful trick to put it where people don't expect it necessarily. So early on, I think it forces that decision of do you go for it because you know this is a birdie potential eagle hole. And I think it works pretty well. So going through all of our elements, is there danger? Well, with this one, it doesn't immediately look like it, but the green is perched right up over this barranca, which was the key feature on this course. So if you're going long and right, you are then facing a nightmarish chip down. There's also this green, which was one of our key elements, and that's, I mean, beyond difficult. That's a short par 3 green, if ever I've seen one. And look at your pin positions. This one is nightmarish. There is one just down here, I think, There's one here, and there's one tucked right up on here. Might have put one here instead of back there. I can't remember. I was toying between those two. So you can see that it's going to require absolute precision because it's a 288-yard hole that's supposed to take you 4 shots. The average score on this hole when it was on tour was closer to 4 than it was to 3. So risk-reward balance. If I'm not going for it, have I given options for layups and have I made the layup inviting? I mean, you can easily hit an iron or a wood over here, but it's still going to make you think about rollout because of the way I've cut the fairway, where I've put the bunkers. If I'm hitting 5 wood straight at this, the elevation change might help me, but I might be running into this bunker or this bunker. So I've still got to think, if I'm hitting my 4 iron, well, I'm taking on this one and I'm not sure I'll clear it. So am I erring over this side? Then we're looking at camber, then we're looking at run into this bunker. I've given you lots of space, but it's still not a straightforward tee shot. So that's then again making me think, well, if that tee shot's going to require a bit more precision, should I just go for it? And then you look at that and then you get all the indecision that comes with it. In terms of your preferred angle, well, for this green, everything's sloping this way. So maybe I want to be as far left as possible and then I'm pitching into the slope. Could be one way of looking at it. You could also look at, well, actually the green itself is angled this way, which means that if I'm landing on, I'm going to get easy rollout and I'm not going to miss. If I'm worried about missing laterally, or sorry, vertically, maybe I'm better coming from this side. So maybe I want to make my layup around about here. Maybe back 1 club. I don't know, maybe I want to hit just 6 iron, leave myself a full wedge in. If I want a full wedge in, do I want to be over this side as much as possible? And then we're taking on the barranca again. So the options are there. The green is definitely tough, and your position in the routing, okay, would you want this at 16? You could do. I was trying with this course desperately to do things I hadn't done, and I hadn't put an early drivable par 4 other than Kaiuma. I wanted to go even earlier than that. So there we are. That's really the drivable par 4. It's got to include all of those elements, and the main thing that it has to include is that balance between risk and reward. Have you given, and a huge part of that is giving those options to layup that are sensible layups. So you're saying to the player, well, you could just have a layup here and you're probably making birdie, but you could go for it and you could make eagle. And that's really the challenge with this hole. It requires a lot of play testing, a lot of work to get it absolutely right, but also you want it to feel like the player is never 100% certain about what's going to happen. It's a hole that I find you get better at designing the more attempts you have at them, but definitely don't make it an auto birdie. So that is the drivable par 4 and all that goes with it. It's a really fun hole, and definitely play around with it because there's tons of ideas for making them interesting, and because you can go so wild with the risk reward elements and really making it difficult near the green, I think it's one of the most fun holes to design. It's also going to be a natural high point in your routing, and players can really have a shot at eagle. Do allow that. So I hope that this has been useful, and see you soon.